This is election day in Israel, and the fate of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is unclear right now. In Israel's parliamentary system, voters pick parties, not candidates, and thanks to the machinations of coalition governments there, his party can still lose the vote, and he can still end up as prime minister. Now, early exit polls show Netanyahu's party doing surprisingly well, leading or tied in all the major polls. Netanyahu has declared victory, but it's still officially too close to call. And will take some time to know complete results and how the coalition process plays out in the race for prime minister. But as the race tightened in the final days, Netanyahu made worldwide headlines, essentially shredding what's called the two-state solution, an eventual peace deal that ends with both Israel and Palestine as separate and independent nations.
אחר, כל מי שהולך לפנות שטח היום פשוט נותן שטח התקפה לאסלאם הקיצוני נגד מדינת ישראל.
Now, there are valid arguments both for and against a two-state solution. Israel remains always on guard and often under attack from Palestinians and others who would use an independent Palestine to launch attacks from Gaza and the West Bank. On the flip side is the push for peace, both for Israel and the U.S. Every terror group that has targeted the U.S. cites the Israeli occupation of the Palestinians and U.S. support as a key reason. Add to that, the two-state solution has been the official U.S. policy for the area from President Clinton to Bush to Obama, and is also supported by both Hillary Clinton and Jeb Bush. I did not check with any other 2016 candidates. So, Michael, how does what Netanyahu said about the two-state solution impact what's already a fractured relationship between Netanyahu, if he wins re-election, and the White House?
It's not news. This has been his position the whole time. And it's also not news that he wanted Mitt Romney to beat Obama in 2012, and it's not news that he makes international headlines involving to impact domestic politics at home, and then laments the role of foreign political advisors working for his opponents. He just say whatever, and they cover it because he's the prime minister, and declare victory, and then the smaller parties, and Tom, they're usually like seven splinter parties, Russian immigrants, ultra-Orthodox, more secular Orthodox, and then liberals. Somebody will jump in, having declared victory and form a government with him. Andrew, but saying that there's not a two-state solution that's not news.
I don't even understand why it's being played as big as it is. He's a politician. He said what was basically an 11th hour ploy, and it appears to have worked. Because as of yesterday, he was trailing in the polls, and now it appears that Mr. Netanyahu has won. And so I think he'll pull back from his position as soon as he's...
I mean, look, you had the first part exactly right. I mean, he used it as a political ploy to motivate his voters to get out there to vote. He hasn't changed his position. We need to remain the U.S. position of a Palestinian state needs to continue to be on the table. However, that will never happen until the Palestinians get themselves under control and stop this ritual of every so often starting lobbing bombs into Israel, etc. If they had just laid down their arms and said, we are at peace, we could solve this rather quickly. Because quite frankly, even some of the neighboring Arab states are getting a little tired of this act.
But Tom, if a two-state solution is the official U.S. policy for Israeli-Palestinian relations, and it is officially not the policy of the Israeli prime minister, how does that impact our support for Israel? And isn't that something that has to be taken into account?
No. Israel is our friend. They are our ally. They are one of our closest allies around the world. Doesn't mean we always have to agree with them. What it means is that we have to use our leverage, whether it's the sale of arms, et cetera, to bring them back to the table. But it also means, most importantly, the group you cannot control in this process are the Palestinians. And so we need to keep pushing this and working at it. At the end of this whole conversation, the peace and security of Israel needs to be front and center.
Everything's a policy until it's not, right? The UK wouldn't negotiate with the IRA with Sinn Féin until they did. The Soviet Union was impenetrable until it collapsed, and the wall fell in Berlin. Things are policies until they're not, and then you look back and say, how did we miss it? So just because we're saying this now doesn't mean we're not going to be back here in a month or a year or in 9 months or next week saying a breakthrough in negotiations and they're coming to the table, because you can never parlay when you're back on your heels. You always negotiate from a position of strength, and that goes for all the parties involved. So that's what we're seeing right now.
I want to ask a different question, which is, and again, we're still waiting for the results of the election to find out what happens. Let's say that Netanyahu loses as prime minister. and the new prime minister comes in and says, you know what, I'd be fine with a deal with Iran if the U.S. wants to work out a deal with Iran.
You can't.
They'll
recall him in about 6 days.
The primary challenger to Netanyahu says he would support a deal.
Good, and that's why he lost. I mean, that is why he will, as we're on the air tonight, he will not be the prime minister of Israel. How? Look, I don't understand how we are not. The idea that Iran would have a nuclear weapon is just beyond. I mean, Democrats, Republicans have said across the board that this is an unacceptable solution. So I don't even know how the guys running as Prime Minister of Israel thinks that position would make anybody in his country happy. They want to destroy Israel.
Here's where we'll disagree. The idea that Netanyahu's speech in Congress was about Iran is comical. It's like in Wag the Dog. It's like there's no problem with the B-2 bomber. Well, there is no B-2 bomber. Exactly, there's no problem with the B-2 bomber. Why do you keep saying there is? He was there for the elections, and he was there because whatever happened, they wanted to re-cement and reinforce the relationship between Israel and the United States, and they want to impact the presidential election here in 2016. It was about everything except Iran.
Absolutely. So. No question about it.
I'm going to poke the bear a little bit here.
Go ahead.
Do you really think that either with a deal or without a deal, that it will be somehow acceptable for Iran to get a nuclear weapon? If there's a deal that's formed, wouldn't there still be provisions to make sure that they don't get a bomb? Isn't that kind of the whole point of a deal?
I don't understand the question. I don't understand the question.
Well, because everybody, if you sign the deal and the Republicans who wrote the 47...
What deal are we signing?
Well, 10 years, right?
Over 10 years.
Over 10 years, you can't develop a bomb. Well, great, take the deal, and then 6 years from now we'll revisit it, or 2 years from now.
47 senators said, and basically tried to scuttle the deal with that letter with Iran by basically saying, you know, we can revoke any deal because we don't want Iran getting closer to the bomb. Netanyahu said any deal with Iran would put them closer to the bomb.
Right. I mean, look, I just think that we need to make it very clear to Iran is that we're going to sanction you to death. And that's the end of the story. I mean, this is not a group of people that we want having a nuclear weapon.
To what end? What's the point of the sanctions?
The point is that I think that you put such economic chaos on them that their existing leadership collapses. Because I really believe that Iran, like many Arab countries, there's a younger population there that would like to have a more access to the world. And right now they're very isolated over there. That's what I would hope to be the case. And let them decide what they want to do. But look, I just think that you can't have the leadership of a country who is at war, or at least speaks of annihilating an ally of ours. To me, that's unacceptable.
That sort of glosses over a bit of fairly recent history in that the United States funded and armed both sides of conflicts that went on in that region because we saw that as our surest path to stability and Israeli security. We supported both Iran and Iraq in their war that went on for 10 years, cost countless lives. Was there more stability then than there is now? Well, the world's a more complicated place, maybe, but none of this is going to be decided dependent on what happens in Israel tonight.
All right, have to jump to a break. When we come back, we're going to switch gears dramatically. Bracket and budget busting for the kids. The NCAA basketball tournament begins tonight with the play-in games. It's $1 billion business with a labor pool that gets nothing besides their education. Is it time to pay the players, and if so, how? That's next.